Well, John Magufuli has been sworn in as Tanzania's president after he won a second term in last week's elections. Magufuli was declared the winner by the Electoral Commission with a huge proportion of the vote. Opposition parties, however, are calling for protests, alleging widespread vote fraud. Magufuli's party has been in power since Tanzania gained independence back in 1961. Well, we can now speak to Lydia Mugambe. She's served as a judge in the High Court of Uganda and is also a member of the independent observer group Tanzania Elections Watch. And she joins us now from the Ugandan capital, Kampala. Lydia, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I know you were involved with election monitoring this time round. What was your assessment of this poll?
As Tanzanian Election Watch, we observed that there was several malpractices in this election. There was ballot stuffing with pre-ticked ballot papers for the ruling party. There was delayed or denied opposition polling agents to effectively observe the elections as they were required for their candidates. There were several arrests of opposition candidates. I can give you an example of Chadema's Sinza. There was violence by police and the army on and other violations of human rights. And all this goes to instill fear. And this was both on the mainland and in Pemba and Zanzibar. Opposition candidates were not given an opportunity to effectively campaign in the space leading up to the elections. On election day, Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp were all shut down for several hours. And all these things affect communication. And then in the years leading up to the election, there's been a lot of restrictive laws coming up, which have affected the flow and exchange of information, association, and expression of the people, which are vital rights for an election.
Sure.
So we've observed a growth in all these things in the lead up to the elections, and they inevitably affected the result or the elections on election day.
Lydia, it does seem, though, that despite all the opposition and the dissent around this, Magufuli is now officially president again, having been inaugurated. So what legal recourse or options might the opposition have at this stage? Or is it now a done deal, essentially?
In a sense, it is a done deal because under the Tanzanian constitution, Article 41(7, bars contesting presidential elections. So to that extent, there's nothing much that they can do. But I think we need to keep the pressure up. We need to have a records of what has happened, and this will help inform future elections and serve as a learning curve for other African countries, at least. We do hope...
Sorry, Lydia, I didn't mean to interrupt you there because I did want to ask you about protests. There was much talk of protests, and instead they didn't really materialize. We saw some high-profile arrests instead. Do you think that there is some level of acceptance now of Magufuli's presidency?
I wouldn't call it acceptance. What I observe is the protests were, they came down on the protesters in high-handed ways, and this defeated the protests. But I don't think that killed the spirit of the protesters. So I think while you know how you carry on, though you're disgruntled, I think that's the kind of thing they're having. There's always a consistent pattern of protesters, and then the government comes up with high-handed measures in dealing with them.
Lydia, I want to ask you about the human rights record of Magufuli. Human rights organisations have been very outspoken about his increasingly authoritarian moves during his first term on the opposition, the media. Heading into this term now, do you think he feels emboldened?
With all due respect, I don't think President Magufuli has done well on the human rights front. And as Tanzanian Elections Watch, we have witnessed this in many different ways. There's a lot of suppression of association, freedoms of expression. There's been gagging of media houses, so people were not able to get information freely. There's been violence, not only in the lead up to the elections, but violence even on election day and post-election. And when you have violence meted out on the leaders of opposition, the message that is being sent out to opposition is, take care, we're coming for you. there's been a lot of verbal attacks on opposition.
I think we have potentially lost Lydia there from Tanzania Elections Watch, speaking to us about what's going on in Tanzania.